What's up, Bitcoiners? What is up? Sun totally up despite the snow coming down. Bitcoin totally running despite crypto Twitter being depressed and full of anxiety. Notice there's people complaining about that. How bad can it get on crypto Twitter? Well, I've been on Bitcoin Twitter. Seems the same to me, right? So all we have to do is have some coffee and talk about the news. See what's new. See what's new. Hyper Bitcoinization, 1 day closer. 1 day closer, everyone. Did anyone see the New York Times crossword puzzle yesterday? Did anyone have a look at it? You got to see it for yourself. I can't even describe it. All right, so go have a look at the New York Times crossword puzzle yesterday. I don't know where is it AI making it? You know, didn't they say to AI that it gets really racist if it spends too much time on the internet, and that's why we don't connect it? So maybe this was like AI connected to the internet that created this crossword times puzzle. Well, I'll try to show it. Maybe the camera will be able to pick it up. It's a funny design. I don't know where they got it from. It's a little strange. There it is, right there. All right, that was the crossword puzzle in the New York Times yesterday. I don't know what is happening here. It's pretty ridiculous. Crossword puzzle. I don't know who got to the end of that one yesterday, but it made some news. You know, we like to pick up on fake news stories, right? It's always a good time. There's this story out there that people are tracking on Jesus, the puzzle looks interesting. It does. Yeah, what's up with all that symbolism recently? Yeah, it's a pretty funny puzzle. All right, I don't know. I feel like it's interesting to bring up on this show. Very wild. I really want to know the history. I just want to know the story. Like, if a machine made it, I can get it. But a lot of people saying, well, how come the machine found that one, the random crossword puzzle maker found that design, and yesterday happened to be the first day of Hanukkah, right? So I don't know, we'll see. This is an argument happening on Twitter right now. You know, so much going on Twitter, it's easy to miss all these different arguments, but this one is one that I noticed that kind of stuck out. You know, this new movie Avatar #2, Avatar sequel. A lot of people think it's great. Some people think it's terrible. All kinds of reaction to it. Now, you know, the movie is set on a foreign planet and is steeped in the tropes of colonialism. I mean, it's the story is so simplistically about colonialism and extraction of resources from another land that it's some people don't like it because of that. But it seems like the narratives aren't enough. It turns out that all of the blue CGI people have actually triggered some folks on Twitter. So they're really mad that all of the people underneath the CGI are white and they didn't hire enough black people to paint blue in order for the movie to, I guess, be good. And they're saying that it's not just blackface. The movie is red and blackface now. It's a new form of red and blackface when you use CGI to paint someone blue, even though they weren't blue in the first place, because no one in the movie was blue. It's only white people. So they're really pissed off about it. So, and then what makes it worse, I guess, is that they were CGI'd with dreads, have dreadlocks. So that's mega super cultural appropriation, I guess, because the blue people have the dreads. Right. So now it just, if you guys haven't seen this, think of that attitude and then contrast it. You guys got to see this. It's amazing. Say what you will about Tom Cruise, right? A lot of people have a lot of bad things to say about him, the Scientology stuff. That's all pretty questionable. No doubt. I'm not here to defend his Scientology from years ago. I have noticed, though, first of all, his movie Eyes Wide Shut. A lot of people talking about it these days. A lot of people talking about Kubrick. What went on in the movie Eyes Wide Shut, where the missing, I think there's like 20 minutes the studio took out after. And of course, we know Kubrick died. He died when this movie was created. It stars Tom Cruise, and there's some sexual deviance stuff going on in it. Tom Cruise, if you haven't seen this, right? So talking about people complaining and being jerks, Tom Cruise filmed one of the most amazing thank you ads I've ever seen in my life. And he just did it simply. He said, "Thank you for letting us entertain you." He's in an airplane and he's hanging out the window saying he's above South Africa and he's about to get a shot, but he just wants to say thanks for coming to Top Gun Maverick. Thanks for letting us entertain you. Just a lot of humility, nothing more to it than that. And then he jumps out of the plane like a real, sort of movie star move. But the humility was the cool part, right? Just hearing this guy say thanks for coming, because I think everyone knows that Hollywood is existentially threatened right now, that the idea of going to the movies and all that just is nowhere near what it used to be. We just experienced one of the worst US Thanksgiving holiday box office markets in the history of the industry. And a lot of people questioning if there's still a place for Hollywood in the future, especially with all the crying and the whining and this and that. So, Tom Cruise doing that video, pretty neat. And it stands in contrast to things like, people arguing about what's going on with the Avatar Blueface. But they're not the only ones who are upset about the lack of diversity. So the lack of diversity in Avatar coming under question, even newspapers writing about it, but none like the Washington Post did 2 days ago. The Washington Post wrote an article 2 days ago about the World Cup winners yesterday. So congratulations to Argentina. Winning. We're going to talk a lot about Argentina in a minute. But the Washington Post thought 2 days ago, they wrote a whole article questioning why there aren't more black people on the Argentinian team. They're asking the question out loud and in public. Like, what's up with this, right? Why is it a bunch of white people playing on this team? Where's everyone else? They didn't, for I guess a second, look into Argentina's history and understand that it's not a diverse country whatsoever. It's just immigrants from Europe. That is always what it's been, and since it became Argentina. Obvious race baiting when they asked that question, because there's just no way that anyone didn't know that, right? Full of Italian people and all this stuff. So. But Argentina wins the World Cup yesterday. Huge party in Argentina last night. Everyone's so happy that this fella, Lionel Messi, who is a lot like Tom Cruise from the point of view of thanking fans, having that kind of humility. They're sort of cut from the same cloth in some ways. And everyone yesterday so happy that Messi managed to do it. I didn't see the game live, but I saw the highlights. It looks like the greatest soccer game ever played, from what I can tell. Just the back and forth and the activity and the energy and the drama and all that stuff. So it looked really amazing. I couldn't believe what I was seeing when I watched the highlights. Of course, it ends with the stupid penalty kicks all the time, like everything in soccer always ends. But it looked like a lot of fun. It looked like a great game. So Argentina, one of those countries that has high Bitcoin uptake. Someone was publishing recently the countries with the highest uptake of Bitcoin, and Argentina always near the top. The reason is they have seen failures, institutional failures, and the failure of the nation state entity and the rule of law for over 100 years now. So this is the Jason Lowery famous model of the shift in what we measure wealth in and what we need to protect, right? So his whole thing is that in the old world, we had to protect these physical things in order for the rule of law to work. And that's why sometimes when I describe the US dollar as a facsimile of money through the coordination of certain elements, like the war machine, like aircraft carriers, like oil extraction and these other things, what this ends up really just underlining is the US dollar is a collection of courts, systems that value these elements here. In this case, in his model, it's real estate, gold, oil, and equities. So these are the ways we preserve wealth, and we use the legal system in order to strengthen all of these, the ownership of these elements, in order to have a predictable economic system that people can participate in and all that. And what he says, and a lot of people believe that, once you take away these physical containers for wealth, and you no longer need to protect them in order to protect wealth, and you no longer need to rely on this rule of law system as the only way to protect wealth and all those things, and you make it actually about electricity And Bitcoin, if you protect that asset, the electrical creation of Bitcoin, then you'll actually change the entire economic system from the petrodollar to what a lot of people who are hoping for a Bitcoin standard predict will happen. So in the case of Argentina, its history is pretty amazing in its ability to frame the failure of nation state. So it started off as one of these Spanish colonies, and they had a really strange economic development over the years. The estancios, so it's kind of like the landowners in Quebec, they call them the seigneuries lords. And these folks, because the land is so good in Argentina, they were getting sort of cheap immigration. People were coming. So the value of humans coming there was never really great. And it always helped the landowners who got there immediately and took the land by violence. This was a violent takeover in Argentina. And to the extent that there was not a huge population there like there was in Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil, and these other places, they had a lot larger population base because the weather was that much more favorable. In Argentina, of course, you start to get into the cold climates, and so it just wasn't a natural place where people were pushed. There was still plenty of room further north in South America, and so that's where the big population centers were through Mexico and all those places. So when they came, there wasn't as much opposition, let's say, to taking over, but nevertheless, taking over the land was done in an incredibly bloody way and with a ton of violence. And from there, the Spanish, when they lost, so it starts to go into their own sort of fourth turning formula, which I'm not that familiar with, so I'm not going to try and explain the whole fourth turning cycles of Argentina. What I do understand, though, in the same time that the American Civil War was going on, and then after the American Civil War, the Americans actually, the Americans forced the British. So once Spain was no longer really participating down there, and America took control and was too warlike and no one would mess with them anymore, England in particular started moving down into Argentina and really supplanted the Spanish colonial relationship. So they never really became their own thing, even when Spain left. They continued to just export food to Europe, but that left them very vulnerable to shock. So 100 and something years ago, when this was going great, when England was still top of the heap in 1900, and they were exporting coal and oil all over the world, they created a monopolistic relationship with Argentina. So Argentina had to buy oil and coal from England and sold them. So they became a captive market to the British oil industry, and then sold them the beef and all this other stuff. The problem happened not really because of mismanagement in the case of Argentina. The problem really happened when England participated in the First World War and lost so many people and didn't have the same budget anymore for food. And so all of a sudden, the Argentines lost their main export market, and the whole economy was still these landowners who had taken over after the Spanish left and still had power and were influencing government, and it was really them you were negotiating with. They weren't really building much else in the country. The British came in and built all of the infrastructure required to get the resources and the stake out. It wasn't really built for a domestic market, and they didn't have a domestic market that was strong enough to eat all of the food that they were creating in the country, because the landowners who were agrarian, again, had so much power that nothing else was really getting built unless it was from the British, who, like I said, didn't want to negotiate the extraction of beef according to other participants like a rail operator or anything like that. So very weak domestic market in Argentina, which left it vulnerable to global shocks. So when World War I happens and the global market for beef tanks, they're a little screwed. And now they also had problems with money at the time because the rest of the world is going into inflation. They got to resist it a little bit. They moved more into their domestic stock market, did their best to shield themselves from what was going on. But the second shock came for them in a very weird way, which was when the United States paid for the Marshall Plan at the end of World War II. What they actually did was cut the Argentinians out of their natural market because it became food for dollars, right? The US sent so much USD to Europe in order to get food back. And then the Marshall Plan extends in certain ways also to Japan and Korea after their wars too. So the whole export world that ends up predominating after World War II, the Argentines were kind of cut out because they weren't getting USD supplies. They weren't getting it from anywhere. And now their whole export market for food was also screwed. And this is when they really try to pivot and come up with all of these new systems in order to manage their money. But again, this goes to a new era of hyperinflation by the 1980s. So the 1980s hyperinflation that pulls into the late 80s, and then they end up getting their stable coin. They create a convertible peso pegged to the dollar in the 1990s. So in the 1990s, the peg breaks and speculators come in and trash their currency, and again, trouble. So what they have there is a history of, land rule of law is a total failure. It didn't work. They don't really have the kind of natural resource extraction you'd expect from a place like that. So they never really built the oil industry. I don't know much about gold mining there. I think there's mines, but I don't know much about it. And even if there are, again, it would fit into this colonial sort of people going in, capital investment, pulling stuff out. And their equity markets, of course, the thing that happened to them that's so devastating for their country is, in order to have wealth preservation in Argentina since the convertible stablecoin broke in the 90s, meant full participation in US equity markets. So all of the rich people just got financial managers over there to help them buy US stocks to preserve their wealth, because they knew they couldn't do it in their home country. It was never going to be a good formula, right? So because of that, they left themselves incredibly vulnerable. Now, what ended up happening psychologically is, they call it this lost century, right? And the idea psychologically of the 100-year decline is something that is widely held in the country, the 100-year decline. And what it basically means is, psychologically, they've accepted that these institutions have failed them, and they don't really expect them to come save them. One of these images, everyone talking about JFK these days, we don't know, and I brought him up in the show, but now lots of people are talking about what happened, and it's starting to catch on to discuss what's going on in light of the Twitter files, and in light of what we understand now from, and we're going to talk a bit about the supplemental Twitter files, which were released yesterday by Matt Taibbi. So these folks, having the influence over domestic policy that we're seeing they have, these national security, infrastructure, spies, intelligence community, all these guys, having them under question now, and bringing it back to Kennedy, is opening up a lot of people's eyes, because there was a time just weeks ago, where if you were to mind read, I guess you can say, a Democrat, what a lot of them are hoping for, or at least their vision for how to get out of this, is a sort of charismatic Kennedy-type character who would come in and run the government efficiently and inspire people to work for them and do all kinds of stuff, and they would all get on board, and they would bring the country together, and the president would be this rallying person, and he would muster everyone, and it would be great. It would be leadership, right? So that whole idea is farcical more than ever. And that's the kind of thing that we have to give up on in America. There is no president who's going to come and save us. We can get a president who can help tear it down more, right? That's the appeal that I had for Trump. And if you take the new guy, like I always say as a Bitcoiner, my politics are loved Trump. The new guy, as a Bitcoiner, kind of better, like kind of better, right? And we'll go straight to Fetterman if we need to, right? We'll go right to Fetterman. Fetterman's not getting anyone together. He's not inspiring any change of these institutions. You're actually putting it in the same context that Argentina has already accepted. There is no Superman coming. They can't wait for him. It's not going to happen. And they're already psychologically there. I've often said that America's problem is its patriotism and its belief that there will be someone who will come and save the country. You can say, you know, someone who's breaking systems like Ye could do it, but is Ye gonna like inspire everyone to be together? I don't think so. I think he's gonna keep using the shock stuff, keep using the Trump playbook of breaking your brain in order to get change, you know, as he himself describes it, moving the Overton window. These are his own words. He knows what he's doing, right? Kanye knew what he said was going to get him into trouble, just as today he would know what to say to get himself out of trouble if that was his goal, right? If he really just wanted to get out of trouble, he would know what to say. I mean, it's not hard, right? Like, I'm really sorry. I said those things. I won't do like the New York Times and put a swastika anywhere. You know, he could do all that today, right? But of course he chooses not to, because he's trying to break brains and change the world, and just as Trump did in his time. And you know, Fetterman just does it naturally. It's just he has a natural talent to break your brain. I wonder how that is, right? That's why we're Fetterman fans. And no word of a joke, right? I'm not kidding. If they put someone like Fetterman in charge, what it would do for us to not even look to these places for answers would be great. Just closing those options is good enough, as far as I'm concerned. You know, you've got America really on this road, right? You've got America on the road to Argentina, and that's what's good. Argentina is just ahead of the game, right? Their history is such a mess, so bad for the performance of these institutions, that they're not expecting to reform them whatsoever. There is no expectation amongst the majority of the population that the answers can be found in previous systems. So the open-mindedness of Argentinians to total and complete change is pretty high. And that's why I've been down there on Bitcoin stuff in my life, and I've met people down there and spent a lot of time with the Bitcoin community down there. And it was interesting to hear them back in those days, before we knew about COVID and before everything had really been unveiled for people in North America. We still had this we gave the benefit of the doubt to a lot of these players, and that's being stripped away. And it took 100 years, think about it, it took 100 years for Argentina to stop believing in these institutions whatsoever to get where they are. And they're that much further ahead now. They got plenty of problems, right? I'm not saying that there aren't folks there who still want power to lie in political institutions. There are definitely people there who think they can just do a bit of reform here, right? Put some experts on the case, right? Give them, you know, make sure they're really smart people, and like, you know, the idea like we used to have about our medical system, right? This idea that the American Medical Association was like, oh, great, it's a bunch of good doctors and they're going to get together. That sounds perfect, right? And then one doctor is good, right? What about a bunch of doctors, right? That sounds even better. And if a bunch of doctors can get together and work through their differences and apply some science and the scientific method, and they can reason with each other and come up with answers, we're going to be golden. We're going to have the best system ever, right? But on this show, we've told you who runs the American Medical Association. It's not doctors paying dues and doing their aw shucks best. It's big food and big pharma, right? They corrupted this thing a long time ago. And so the expectation that they're ever going to do anything for you and not for their client, big pharma and big farm, is absurd. It's absurd. And the Argentinians, while they might be poor, while they might have troubles, they're one step closer to understanding that the system is unreformable. And when I was down there, it was easier, let's say, to have these discussions and to dismiss political reform as a viable opportunity because of their conditions. And that's a huge difference, but it's getting there in America, right? It's getting there in America. Just look at the list of folks, for example, that we've seen the FBI target, right? All it does is show that the FBI are not smart people, right? Now, to the extent that these were geniuses in some plot to overthrow and manipulate, I don't know. Think about it like this, right? Who at the FBI is unqualified to be on field work, right? So you start doing the math, right? A bunch of people who unqualified for field work. Oh, we got these other jobs that are like looking at social media. So these people sit there all day and look at social media, and they get the special power of being able to complain on things they personally don't like. And that's all it became, was a bunch of people who didn't like things personally and could make a list, right? This person, that's why you get to such small little accounts getting tagged and silenced. Now, this doesn't excuse it, right? Corporate confusion and corporate inefficiency at the FBI is still a huge problem, but it really, and it's the main problem in the end, right? That's what Argentina has realized. You can't just put all of these people together and expect a good result. If the incentives don't align, if the system simply can't orient itself in any way that one group is going to benefit, and then that benefit will help everyone, it's not going to work. They had the estancios, they had the landowners, they had populist politicians, and every single one of them led to the same result. Primarily, I'll say, right, because the Marshall Plan didn't apply to them. They almost got cut out by accident from a dollar supply. And if you see what the US dollar did to their friends in Europe and their friends in Asia after, dollar supply was easy to get, right? What they did with Japan and Korea after the wars was they said, Japan and Korea, you build huge ships, just build like shipping ships, cruise ships, make the biggest ships in the world, and you can sell those to us for like $1 billion. And it's a way to get cash quickly, right? That's how Korea and Japan got rich. They made huge ships. I've been to their shipbuilding ports. It's unreal, right? The size of these container ships they would build in South Korea. I think they're the biggest in the world. I remember seeing them go into the water there, and just enormous things. And we don't have that kind of shipbuilding capacity, I don't think, anymore. We exported it all to them, and it was a way to get, at one time, a huge check, basically, of US dollars because you were trading these huge things. And because Europe was already taking the food market for the USD at the start of this Marshall Plan in the 50s, that just cut Argentina out. So they got screwed by international order, they got screwed by the USD, and none of this stuff developed the way it should, and the rule of law is nowhere to be seen to protect any of this stuff. So the point is, as everyone knows, right, Argentina is just vulnerable. They're just vulnerable to hyper-Bitcoinization because their psychology has been massaged through utter and total failure for so long. And it's not on the part of the people. The people are just the ones who get used by this constantly, because even when Argentina was going well, the reason it was going well was because labor was cheap. There's more people around, and the people were not getting cheap. If you look 100 years ago when Argentina was so-called rich, right, when everyone says, oh, it was a great time, it was a great place, yeah, kind of. That was before Britain lost all of its young people to World War I, and the time when it was enough to just export to Britain because they had the highest standard of living, the highest level of consumption, the market for the beef was enormous, all of it could sell. So for that little brief period 100 years ago, Argentina was great. But it was still dependent on foreign activity, in the sense that if markets weren't good in England, they were screwed, right? They weren't on their own, really. And it was while it was going well, the rule of law systems were still not setting them up for long-term success. It was still just another way to try to skirt over inflation, over other industrial failures. And again, the only reason why there are fond memories of that time was because it was easy to get a job, because labor was cheap, right? You just fire people and all that stuff. So, but the story here in America, right, continued to be, just like I often compare China and America, and how China has an advantage because they have a culture and they know that the yuan is not the culture, and they expect fully their government to screw them over and debase it and arbitrarily change the exchange rate for their own benefit. So the people are really savvy to get in and out. And just as I've mentioned, at my time living in Korea and Japan, I got used to just normal people arbitraging foreign exchange and the US dollar all year long. All year, this was just an activity. Oh, it's going to go up next week, you should trade, right? That would just be like a normal conversation with teenagers, right? Teenagers would talk like that. I was 21 years old when I lived there, And so I hung out with, you know, young early 20s and people just out of school and stuff like that. And you know, when we were, like I said, when we were there, they would just talk about trading their small paychecks for dollars or whatever. And Americans, because of patriotism, for a long time until COVID, didn't quite have that penetrating visibility. There's more to America than just the money. You can still be a patriot. I've never met bigger patriots than Koreans. I mean, really, they love their country. They love their country, but they know the money in their country is not their country. It's just money. And so they love other money, and they love the US dollar, and they have to deal with capital controls in their country, which they don't love. So it's another reason why they don't love their money. And psychologically, that's why there is a market for Bitcoin in Korea. And to this day, I say, is why the name Satoshi Nakamoto comes from the Japanese language, in order to have the bird's eye view of someone who's lived in Japan to say, look what you've done, America. Just like Japan had the lost decade in the 1990s, and Argentina had the lost century, you're going to have the same loss. Now that your money can no longer function the way it has before, it's all going to change. And having the Japanese name is almost like saying, I know enough, I've seen it, and it's coming to you, America. I almost saw all of Satoshi's early writings about the white paper, the context that was in, was about saying that to America. Whatever happened to the rest of the world because of the ascendance of the US dollar is about to happen to you. And you're not immune to it, right? So that's a big change. And now in America, we're starting to see that same divide, right? How many people in America just a few years ago would have said, you know, oh, wow, I think the national intelligence institutions killed JFK. You know, you had a couple people, yeah, but a lot of people would have said, come on, I can't believe that, right? It was still a conspiracy theory. After all we've seen with Twitter, with the election stuff, it's so much more believable now. It's so easy to imagine. I don't know if it's true. It's just easy to imagine. It used to be hard to imagine, and now it's easy to imagine. Look at all this stuff going on in Arizona with that election. And it looks like Kari Lake is going to get her chance to make her case. It looks like, and there's even a precedence of 100 years ago, 1916, they had a recall a year after the election. So there is precedence in Arizona for this. 1 year after the election, they found out that the governor had cheated, the one who won, and he had to go to jail. He had to pay his year's salary back, and they overturned the election and implemented the true winner. And I mean, I don't have any proof about what happened in Arizona, nothing. I just know that now that they got the judge to look at the evidence, it's not going to be the same as it was in the 2020 stuff. And the 2020 election, all legal cases were the same. The judge said, we have no standing because it won't make a difference if I overturn these 30,000 votes, or never that high, sorry, these 1,000 votes. They never were able to put all of those cases in aggregate, because nor would you want to. There's no logic to do that. They're not one case. So they would only look at every one of the cases independently. What someone needed to do was put it all together, and that was too complicated and never happened, and things moved too quickly. So, but the lingering lack of trust in the institution is now pervasive. So America is on an accelerated timeline compared to Argentina. You know, just make sure. Oh yeah. So one of the best things happening right now in order to help push this along, I think anyway, I think one of the best things happening by far is the way Elon Musk is managing his CEO position at Twitter. So this morning he comes out with this whole thing where, if I fail the poll, you can, you know, I'm going to quit, right? So what's really neat about that is watching him A/B test in real time. And we see that there's no ego involved, in the sense that, you know, he could be wrong. He might be wrong. He goes back on things he says a little bit after he says them. And even this new CEO thing, I think he has a person in mind already, and it's probably a marketing trick, right? Never forget, Elon is the main marketing agent of all of his companies. There is no marketing department at Tesla. There is no marketing department at Starlink. There is no marketing department now at Twitter. It's all him. And so running this poll to put the CEO in makes sense. He's been in there for however long now, and he might have someone in mind. And some people even saying Lex Friedman might do it. Lex Friedman, who we're trying to get for Bitcoin 2023 in Miami, right? May 18th to 20th, trying real hard to get Lex Friedman. Think he's not so much to speak about Bitcoin per se, but about Bitcoin in the world today and what he's seeing and what's going on in the world today, right? That kind of thing. So Lex Friedman on the list. But when you look at the way Elon is doing this, the way he even targeted the journalists who he got to bring out the Twitter files, right? Barry Weiss, and even disagreeing with Barry Weiss a little bit in the process, and Matt Taibbi. And, of course, what this does is it insulates him from being too one-sided. These were all kind of liberal refugee writers, Michael Schellenberger, Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss, all people who have left the control left, right? They've gone out of that left-wing, singing off the same songbook, coordinated thought police thing. So these guys think for themselves, can change their mind, and that's really the big thing. Being able to change your mind is what is really valuable right now. And watching Elon change his mind in real time, watching the journalists he chose as people who are capable of changing their mind, right? That's the important thing. They're capable of changing their mind. Because everyone in America right now is going through that. Everyone's mind, not everyone, but enough people are waiting to change, right? We feel it. It's all around us. Some folks going this way, some folks going that way, but free radicals, even speaking of free radicals, you had Majid Nawaz had Samson Mao on yesterday, and that's the name of his show, right? The New Radicals or the Free Radicals, or what does he call it again? The Radical Show, right? Talking about UBI, right? Talking about UBI. Now, UBI, as we know, is a combination of a CBDC, and what they were talking about on Majid Nawaz's show yesterday with Samson was all about what is the cost, right? It's, of course, your personal information. We've got that story out of Holland today, where Ava, I can't pronounce her last name. It's one of those 10-foot-long Dutch last names. But she's the girl who's now interested in Bitcoin, and I'm also trying to get her to Bitcoin 2023. She goes on Tucker Carlson sometimes, quite pretty, but we're not here to talk about her looks. Smart as a whip, and has been following all this Dutch farmer stuff, and didn't know anything about Bitcoin, but when she realized what UBI and CBDCs were, she realized she needed to start arming herself and protecting herself. So people have gone out and said, get into Bitcoin and these things. But again, we're talking about the psychological space of whether we're still going to work with these people and buttress the institutions that would do these things, right? I don't think so. I don't think it's even in the cards anymore. Are we going to trust a group, and what Sheila underlines is the Dutch are going to do it with by 2030, it's going to be your carbon footprint, and they're going to relate it to the airplanes and the food and everything you eat, and it's going to be consumption, right? It's basically going to be a tax on consumption, even more than ever before, tax on energy use and all these kinds of things. So, she's out there ringing the alarm. She's been on a bunch of shows talking about how dangerous this is. Samson Mao on a bunch of shows. Are people in Argentina going to trust these guys, right? Are they going to trust these guys? I don't think so, right? I can't imagine it. And that same spirit is coming to America, where while some people might, right, it's going to be harder and harder too. And how do we know that kind of trust is eroding in America so quickly? Just look at this. We talked about it yesterday, the lying about the jobs report, right? Lying about how many jobs were created just before the election. This is the Philadelphia Federal Reserve. I've spoken to them. I've gone to the Philadelphia Fed and talked about Bitcoin before. They were open-minded at the time, right? But it looks like they're up to their old shenanigans again, politically captive. And they lied. It was 10,000 jobs created in 2022 Q3 before the election, not a million as they reported. And a lot of people have been saying for a long time, because truthfully, because GDP is such a sketchy data point, it's not really that important. As someone who follows economics, to me, the only data point that really matters is employment, right? That's how you get a really good sense. But if they're even lying about employment, that means all the decisions that are being made for interest rates and all that is totally misinformed, and is way too much power to be left up to chance. So I think this lying of the jobs report, simultaneous to raising interest rates as dramatically as they have since they lied, right? They've raised them 3 times since they lied. 3 times since they lied. Had that employment number been different, it would have been much harder for them to make the case, because it would be much easier to go against them and say, do you know what kind of calamity economically you're about to cause, right? And we've never had that conversation, really. No one's ever put Powell to the wall and said, like, do you know what the cost of what you're doing is? You know, and not trying to say they need to make another decision. I don't know anything about what it is they do. I'm here to take the power out of their hands to even do it in the first place. So I'm not saying he had a right decision to make here, right? That's not what I'm saying, and he made the wrong decision. I'm saying they shouldn't even be in this position. So so just a few weeks ago, they lied like that, have raised interest rates so much. Again, this is another instance where it's going to radicalize more and more Americans to be like Argentinians, right? They're going to be, and did you know, by the way, the simulation winking at us, right? Messi, like a Messi, you know, Argentine in Latin language means money, right? Messi money. Did you know that? It's the Messi money. Argent in French is money, right? It's money. So Argentine is like little money, if you would say it in French. Now, I don't know exactly in Spanish. I don't even know where they got the name of that country. I have no idea. But if I was to read it with Latin lens, I would say Messi money, right? There you go. The Messi money place won the World Cup because of Messi. So go to England, right? Now, England, this country that helps Argentina get into its troubles, right? They help them. What are they dealing with? Well, strike action throughout the country, right? Nurses, ambulance workers, customs and immigration staff, postal and rail workers, all on strike this week. It's the cost of living crisis, right? Inflation again. Another country who did have good systems and rule of law, right? They were different. They were able to manage these things well. You ever heard of this? I think it's like a Dostoevsky quote or something like that. One of these Russian guys. He's describing where European people get their arrogance from. And it's a great insight into Europe, right? I'll end it with England. In his story, he ends it with Russia. But here, I'll end it with England just to give you the punchline. The Frenchman gets his arrogance from the certainty that everyone in the room is jealous of him and wants to be him, and, you know, would love to have his life. The Italian gets his arrogance from the certainty that he can enjoy life more and lose himself in the minute and not have as much care and things weighing him down. The German gets his arrogance from the certainty that if he puts his mind to it, he can understand everything in the world. And the Russian gets their arrogance from the certainty of the opposite, that nobody knows anything, and they're the only one who knows anything, which is they know nothing, right? So it's a bit of nihilism. But the Englishman gets his arrogance from the certainty that his kingdom is the best organized. And for many, many years it was, right? For many, many years. The rule of law through the British system, the flexibility, it was a kind of decentralized system. It was organic, and it did a lot of good, right? It did a lot of good. But like all systems, entropy can set in, and we see the rot. And now they're dealing with the same shit that Argentina deal with. It's the hyperinflation coming to them, all kinds of trouble. Now they got to go out and sell this coin with the king's face on it. You know, all their money used to have the queen, and people were into that. But now they got to pump a new shit coin because it's a new coin. It's a new coin. I don't care what anyone. It's a totally new coin, right? Just because they inherited the books, the world changed. The world changed, and England is there with a new coin with the guy with the ears on it, and we'll see how it goes. But they got to pump it up. And it's not going to be that easy. It's not going to be as easy as it was with the Queen. Could you imagine the change in patriotism? As I said, patriotism here is the problem when it comes to being patriotic about your money. And imagine in England, right? They're just going to change the whole money now because this new guy is the king. And he's weird looking. He's super weird. Nah, I'm not here to make fun of weird looking people. But he had his face on the money all the time. You know, come on. I mean, she was cool. Like, she was on my money growing up. She wasn't irritating to look at, right? He's irritating to look at. So good luck. Good luck. I don't know what Canada's going to do. I guess they got to do the same. I haven't seen the money yet, but that's the way they got to do it, I guess. Now you get Europe as well, right? Now everyone getting in trouble for this corruption in the European Parliament with Qatar and that blockchain girl, Ava Kiley, right? She got arrested. What about Ghana? Do you know that Ghana is going to suspend debt service payments on its external debt, right? So already things changing really, really quick. And psychologically, we're all Argentina, guys. It's coming, right? All coming. I received a 3% cost of living increase, while at the same time, my electric bill was raised by 30%. The government thinks we do know. Joe, where do you live? Let me know. Well, you don't have to let me know, but curious. Must be UK. I don't know. Yeah, Lex still into shitcoinery. Yeah, he might be. Yeah, I've seen him. RGU time for all of us. Yeah, Steve. Oh, PA. Oh, you did get a cost of living. Okay, I didn't know they did that in America. I'm not exact. I'm like not really reachable for these things. You know, I never got the stimmy checks. I hid from all of it. I pay U.S. taxes secretly. You know, or mildly. I'm not American. That's what I mean by secretly. I got to pay someone to keep them all off my tail, though. All right, team. Still haven't made it. On my way to Toronto. Could be today. We'll see if the car's ready, if the snow abates. We're not sure. But we're doing well. All right, PA represent. We got lots of Pennsylvanians. All right, team. Peace.